inspire, connect,
resource, growing healthy churches
is in relationship for God's mission.
So welcome to this next SCBA podcast. It's great to have Stephen Gaukroger with me, and Stephen's going to be sharing with us on the 4th of November at our Leaders Day, which we're really looking forward to. Welcome, Steve. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm well, thank you. Looking forward to the day.
Great. It's good to see you. I came across your name many, many years ago when I was at London Bible College, when every student learned of a very important theological tone of which they needed to cope with ministry. And you may remember these books.
Gosh.
Do you remember?
I do. I remember writing them well.
Because Nick Mercer was at London Bible College, so it was on top of his reading list.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you read these, you'd get through the course, I think.
No, and apparently Nick and I enjoyed writing them. It happened very quickly. We wrote it over the matter of just a couple of days, really. And Scripture Union told us it was one of the fastest selling books they'd ever had.
I think it was, but I must take you back a little bit. So some of us have known of you for a number of years, but some may not have heard of your name before. So just tell us a little bit about who are you, Steve? Who are you married to? What's your family situation? Just give us a little bit of a context from in terms of your family life and your ministry a little bit.
I grew up in the north of England. I'm a Yorkshireman by birth, born in Sheffield. And after a degree in personnel management, went to read theology at Spurgeon's College. And after that, spent a year, I did a year pastoral diploma. And then I spent a year on staff of the First Baptist Church in Dallas, in Texas, where I taught.
I didn't know that.
I taught in their seminary and travelled America, really, to various conferences. And First Baptist Church had a membership of 20,000 and a staff of 150, and it was just an amazing experience, made better because I met my wife there, who was nursing at the Baylor Hospital in Dallas, and we were married the following year, and we've got 3 adult children and 4 grandchildren, and another one on the way. So we're a very productive family.
I didn't realise that you married an American lady.
I did, yeah, Janet. She was, as I say, nursing in Texas, and we met at the First Baptist Church, which, believe me, is tricky. In a church of 20,000 members, meeting the right person is odds against you. But no, it's great. Our eyes met across a crowded church. We went out fairly quickly after that and were married the following summer back at First Baptist Church, actually, so that her American family could all be present. But 3 weeks later, we moved to the UK, and we've been here ever since.
And my memory is that you were at Stopsley Baptist Church. Was that your first Baptist church in the UK? Or
It was. After I came back from being in Dallas, Jan and I were engaged at that point. I worked for 6 months or so at Spurgeon's College, doing a bit of work, editing 1 or 2 of Dr. Brown's, the principal's books, and generally doing odds and ends while looking for a church. And Stopsley in Luton was the first church I ended up at. And so we were married in the July, and I started there in September.
And you were there for some years, I guess.
14 years, yeah.
14, yeah. And then went to Gold Hill.
Yeah, that's right.
Have I got that correct as well?
Yeah, you have. I was in Stopsley for 14 years in total. After about 12, I became president of the Baptist Union, and so had a sort of sabbatical year. I mean, I was still pastoring in the church, but travelling. And then at the end of that year, the year following, was when I was approached by Gold Hill and went there. And I was there for 11 years.
And what are you doing now? Because you're not there now, are you? You've got more of an itinerant ministry that's taking place.
Yes. About 10 years ago, I formed a foundation or a trust called Clarion Trust, which was just a vehicle to fund the ministry, really. And because when I was president of the Baptist Union, I had endless opportunities with government nationally and overseas through the BMS and so on. And so those contacts, I just felt very led to develop them, and that God was calling me to a ministry which was based on all I'd learnt in the local church, but beyond that, on the interface between politics and church and medicine and church and business and church. And so Clarion Trust is set up to facilitate my travelling. So I've visited about 40 countries in the last 10 years doing this, and I normally work either with government folk or an archbishop or a senior leader of some kind, trying to make the faith relevant on the macro level, rather than personal expressions of Christian faith, which of course I remain completely committed to. but my work is to leaders, and not just Christian leaders, leadership generally, and trying to help people see that the Bible has relevance to a healthy and flourishing society, whatever your view of Christianity might be.
So I guess when COVID came along, that really must have impacted your travel and your opportunities, or did you kind of just immerse yourself in technology that we're using at this point?
Gosh. Well, to start with, honestly, it was a shock to the system, because I literally couldn't travel. I mean, I did, in 2020, I did travel. There were various gaps, if you remember, between lockdowns, yes, in which it was possible, and I did do some travelling. But I probably made, 4 overseas trips during that year instead of 15. So it was very much reduced. And yes, you're right, I immersed myself in technology. So in 2019, I produced 11 vlogs or video ministry clips, 11 in 2019. In 2020, I produced over 300. And so the difference between those 2 years, the dramatic impact of lockdown, was very clear in Clarion's ministry. For a while, we went almost exclusively online. So my meetings were all on Zoom, and my preaching was via the internet, and we were recording and filming almost every day.
And how did you personally find that transition? Because many of us are so used to having a congregation in front of us that kind of inspires us when we're speaking, and then suddenly looking at a camera.
That's a really, yes. I mean, I found it challenging, not impossible, but challenging. I'd done a lot of filming over the last 10 years, so I wasn't unused to it. I'd recorded video series for various agencies and so on, so it wasn't unusual. But I really missed the exposure to a congregation of real people in a conference setting as much as anything, where the interplay between the speaker and the audience is crucial to the delivery of the message. And I've been using a phrase which I use in some of the videos when I'm teaching on this about getting back after lockdown. I say, it's great to be on the Zoom, but it's better to be in the room. And learning to cope, as I did, with just preaching to myself. Nobody laughed at my jokes. Nobody responded to my smile. No, I mean, it was just speaking into this great vacuum. So it was tough, to be honest. I didn't always enjoy it. So now we've got back. I was in America speaking back in June, and it was just brilliant. Full churches, conferences. It just felt like I was back, which was marvellous.
Well, we're really glad that we are. I mean, the plan is 4th of November, God willing, that we will be face to face, and we'll be at Andover Baptist Church together. And it'll be the first time we've done that for our Leaders' Day since COVID started. So we're all looking forward to that. So it'd be good to see everyone in the room rather than on Zoom.
Yes,
but we do give thanks for the technology. We do give thanks to the technology, and it does enable this kind of conversation to take place as well, which is really helpful.
Yeah.
Personally, how has the isolation and not being able to get out and see people affected you and your family particularly? Is that been quite challenging for you?
At times, it's been frustrating and difficult because our extended family has been, like many families, there have been a diversity of views. So a small section of the family has been extremely cautious, and so not wanted to meet or only meet outside. And then we've got other sections of the family that think that all the rules are crazy and ridiculous and don't care about meeting and it's no problem. So trying to navigate those two different views in the same family is not without its challenges. And I think many families have experienced that. Honestly, my wife and I are incredibly blessed. I mean, we live in a lovely home, we have space and nature and plenty of food. So, no, lockdown has been absolutely horrible. Horrible for if you're living in a 13th story flat in a suburb of Birmingham or London as a single mum with 3 young children and no outdoor space, and you can't work because they're not in school, and you're feeding them from food banks. I mean, it's debilitating, utterly debilitating. So for us, we've been incredibly blessed by the open space, by enough money, by enough friends and so on. So personally, it's not been that difficult. I've been frustrated by a number of elements of government activity, but in terms of personal life, our family have been protected from the worst. And of course, because so much of my work is in the developing world, in which we're trying to get government and church and charity to work together, we hear stories from the developing world about the effects of lockdown, and it's just horrific. And so I heard from Uganda, for example, fairly recently, in which they said, look, in Britain, people say, stay safe, stay at home. In Uganda, if we stay at home, we die. Because who's going to feed us? And so on. And so there's been far greater, at the moment at least, lockdown desperation in the developing world, and particularly in the absence of any serious vaccination program in most of the developing world. There's desperation that is deep. And I have great links into Myanmar. Christians continue to be arrested and tortured. It's not on the news anymore. There's COVID, there's persecution, there's a military coup, there's hunger. I mean, our news is so Anglo-focused that the global horror of much of this is minimised. And of course, that causes me serious sadness.
Steve, you make a really valid point, and I don't think we stop to appreciate the impact of COVID across the globe. I have links with Zimbabwe, for example, and when they go into lockdown, pastors just don't get paid, and so suddenly pastors are finding themselves in poverty and having to be shut down. And you're absolutely right. Being shut down in Zimbabwe is a route to death. Not a route to life, and the impact is far greater. And we're often just worried about our own selves and the fact we can't meet at as church without recognising the massive impact. So I think that's great to hear that you're so involved with that, and we encourage you in that.
Thank you.
When you join us in November, you're going to particularly focus on what does church look like. Having been impacted by this thing called COVID, and all the ramifications, which are quite complex, aren't they, in terms of how it's changed us as people, but society, but also, of course, church life and spirituality. Can you give us a bit of a flavour of some of the things you might be tempting us with?
I don't think yet we really have a clue about what the long-range implications of the last 18 months are. I mean, there are some health implications. There have been massive strains on the NHS. Death from heart attacks and cancers bound to grow on us in the next few months because of the way COVID has closed down so many of those diagnostic opportunities. So there are health issues which will affect congregations. I think there's fear issues around whether people want to come back and meet because the government's done such an amazing job of frightening the life out of everybody. And so people are nervous about coming back. How do we help them? There'll be disunity issues because some people will be very pro-mask and some very anti-mask. And so there are disagreements around that. There's a huge philosophical debate about the role of the state and whether the state has overreached in terms of its control of the population. There's some big questions about all of that. And then into that world, there are questions about, so how do we do pastoral care if people are frightened of having you in their home? Or how do you do mission when mission is largely relational? And where do you meet people? And it's all right in the summer, but in winter, where we're tending to be more locked down anyway, by nature, and by, potentially escalating cases of, positive tests anyway, of COVID-19 or flu or something. I think the way we're going to have to rebuild from high levels of unemployment, from community brokenness, from the 20% of adults that now claim to have some kind of mental health condition. So there's societal repair, which is going to have to be at the center of church life. What do we mean by that? And how will the good news of Jesus be relevant to a world which throughout COVID has seen the church almost completely absent, apart from some of its social activity, food banks and so on. But the power of Christ and the victory over death which Christianity offers have not been largely publicly expressed very clearly. So there's lots of repair, and I think it's quite an exciting time. We can either be overwhelmed by it or embrace it. So I think we can talk about issues related to those kinds of things.
You sound actually quite optimistic, though. Do you see this as an opportunity of which I wouldn't want to suggest God has caused this to create an opportunity, but there is an opportunity in the suffering.
Yes.
That the church can grapple with and grasp and take forward.
Yes. Well, I'm optimistic on Monday, Wednesday and Friday, and pessimistic on Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday. I am optimistic. I think what's likely to happen is that the Church of Jesus, the middle ground, will be evacuated. Some churches will grasp this, flourish, be bold, and take the opportunities. Other churches, particularly perhaps with an older congregation, are going to be increasingly cautious, fearful. We'll do something when we've had a booster shot. We'll do something when the flu season's over. We'll do something when we've had another booster shot next year and so on. And so I think there'll be some churches that are simply unable to break out of the cycle of cautiousness. And so I see that the middle ground stuff's going to be tricky to hold, and churches are going to evacuate that and are likely to become one or the other. And of course, I'm optimistic that we can encourage lots of churches to be the former and less to be the latter.
In your role, Steve, I assume you're meeting quite a lot and listening to quite a lot of church leaders.
Yeah.
And is there? What are you hearing from church leaders? Because we're hearing a lot of church leaders are feeling quite stretched, and actually the period of COVID very challenging, particularly the technology and trying to serve and care for people. But then coming out of COVID, this idea of hybrid church and how we do mission, feeling quite stretched and anxious about the future.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I mean, the national statistics seem a little hard to get hold of, but some are saying between 17 and 21% of clergy of all denominations are off work with stress-related conditions, which is massive. It's a fifth, basically, which is... it's hard. 1 in 5. I mean, it's stunning, really. And I think that's partly the stresses of learning new technologies, and for many, because pastors tend to be people, and they haven't been able to do that properly for a long time. Many have questioned their calling. I mean, I've heard endless bishops or regional ministers away from my own area saying, many pastors are saying to them, we simply weren't trained for this. We weren't equipped for it. This is not the ministry we joined. And we don't know how to do ministry in this post-COVID world. And so that inevitably breeds stress and concern. So, yeah, I do think ministers are tired, and this is a generalisation, tired and anxious about what will happen in the future, and dreading some of the battles they think they're going to have to face between the bold and the cautious and walking that road and how they do it well. I do think there is a high level of anxiety, even among confident leaders, about the future. My suspicion is it will mean that older ministers, I don't know, 60 plus perhaps, I think it will usher in a desire to take early retirement and to be a lay leader, and they haven't lost their faith, but they just don't want the hassle. And for younger leaders, I think it will make them recalibrate what their expectations from their ministry is likely to be. Of course, all that's a generalization, but you asked me, what the mood music is, and I would say it's that sort of thing.
And I think many will identify with that, and either identify it with themselves or seen it with others as well. And therefore, I think you coming on November the 8th is very timely for us. I think much of what you've touched on already, and I know you've been doing a huge amount of thinking and preparation and writing around this area and listening to others. I think bringing that to us and helping us to think through some of these issues and to consider them together is going to be incredibly helpful. So we're really grateful, Steve, for your time. Grateful for sharing, what you're learning with us on that occasion. And we're very much looking forward to it. I hope you are too.
I am.
Yeah. So bless you. Thank you for your time today. It's been good to chat to you. And we look forward to seeing you on November the 8th, Monday, November the 8th.
Thank you. I'm very much looking forward to being with you all.
Inspire, connect,
Resource. Growing healthy churches.
is in relationship for God's mission.